We don't want to do the house.
All righty, so.
All right, hi, everybody. Welcome to the York County History Writers Roundtable. My name is Jamie Norpel. Tonight's presentation, we're going to have Samantha Dorm. She's going to talk about Paved over Prominence. We are going to have an update from the History Center from Nicole. We are also going to have our roundtable section where people can share what they're doing with history. So if you are tuning on to watch Samantha Dorm, she'll be up in about 10 or 15 minutes. If you don't mind silencing your cell phones so we can give Sam the much needed respect for this presentation. It is a good one. And she'll have more information at the end about how you can get involved. So with no further ado, Nicole is going to come up and give us an update on the History Center.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out on this inclement sort of day, but we're glad to see you. Just a couple announcements before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the York County History Center YouTube channel. We have a few events coming up on second Saturday in September. Our speaker is Charles Stambaugh, speaking on Hanover's Forest Park. On September 14th is our annual membership meeting for the History Center and community awards ceremony. On September 20th is our Civil War Roundtable. Speaker is Matthew Borders, presenting the Maryland campaign of 1862. And our all vet speaker on September 27th is Rich Slack, a Vietnam veteran. Please visit yorkhistorycenter.org for information and to register for any of our programs. So thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Jim McClure. This is the time where we go round and round table when we had one, and everybody tells about their project. So I know we have some takers here tonight. Richard, would you like to start off? Richard Retch from West Manheim, but although I think he's going to talk about Spring Grove.
Yeah. Good evening. Richard Rash with the Heritage Committee for West Manheim Township. We're doing a joint project with Spring Grove Historical Preservation Society and the Coudors Valley Area Historical Area Society on trying to resolve the location of where Spring Forge was, which was a forge built in the Spring Grove area. It started out as a bloomery, which made Peter Dix, the original builder, the first iron works in York County, west of the Susquehanna River. We haven't found the location of the mill or the forge yet, but we did find locations which contradict several of the maps that older maps that have been done. We're kind of homing in on, there's the county database has two mills in Spring Grove, paper mill and forge. This is a third mill. Don't know what it was used for, but it's at least 700 feet off from the other mills over there. So we should wrap up the book later this year, and it's been nice working with the two other agencies as well.
Yes. Thank you, Richard. Anybody else like to just talk about any projects you're working on? Okay, Tina, you want to go, and then we'll go back there. Tina Charles from Lebanon Cemetery, friends of Lebanon Cemetery.
So we've been very, very busy with Friends of Lebanon Cemetery. We just finished our first book, which is a complement to our walking tour. And you can go on Amazon.com and order those. They are $10 each. That highlights some of our more popular figures that the majority of York has heard of or knows about, that has significantly contributed to the history of York, Pennsylvania. We also just had some of our other volunteers, Rebecca Anstein and Vanessa Brown, just finished a book on the Civil War veterans that are interred at Lebanon Cemetery, and it's going to be a very interesting book that should be available very soon, within a few days on Amazon. also, it's called They Also Fought, and it is volume 1. And it's told in first person. It's very interesting to read because they scoured through pension files and got to tell these soldier stories in their own words. And then we also, for the upcoming Oyster Festival with the History Center, last year we showed up and we did a small stand because we had researched and found all of the Black oyster vendors, oyster restaurant owners and the like that have been in New York since as early as the 1820s. So we have put together a little book, also a little booklet also on those that will be available before the Oyster Festival and will be available for that.
You can hold.
Yes, and hope, because Samantha has even more interesting stuff to talk about.
No, actually, they'll stay here, and Miss Ophelia and Jim, if you would come up, please. We do have a copy of the Lebanon Cemetery 150th edition. You have been great champions of Black history for York County, so please. You surprise.
Okay, yes, come on up, make your pitch.
Good evening. My name is Vaughn Kraus. I am the group tour sales coordinator for Explore York, the official tourism promotion agency for York and York County. Earlier this year in February, we launched a series of cultural trails highlighting some of York County's untold stories or hidden gems in the community. Earlier, those 2 trails we launched were a women-owned and operated cultural trail, as well as an African-American focused cultural trail, which the Friends of Lebanon Cemetery have joined the William C. Goodrich Freedom Center Underground Railroad Museum, as well as several other locations in the county, which we promote to group travelers from outside of the area, specifically other states, and try to bring them here and share our stories with those who are unfamiliar with York and York County's history. In November, I'm excited to announce that we are launching our 3rd cultural trail, which will be a military appreciation cultural trail. I look forward to sharing the launch date with you as well. We're hopeful that the Friends of Lebanon Cemetery will want to join this additional cultural trails and experience to offer to group travelers, student youth groups, and the like. So please feel free to reach out to me at Explore York. Again, my name is Vaughn, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Vaughn. Jim, I do have something.
Yeah, that's great, Vaughn. It's really great that you're doing that type of work, and look forward to as you roll out these other trails. Let's see, yes, you'd like to come up and make a pitch? Pitch you next, guy.
Yep, no problem.
Hi, I'll be brief. I'm Mike Ferrer with Vision Solutions AR. We're located right down on George Street. We're a startup technology company. And we do augmented reality, so you can hold up your phone and see things that were there, or historical characters, historical places. And we're really proud to be working right now with Explore York under a grant we just received, the York County History Center. And we're also working with Friends of Lebanon Cemetery to just do different projects. And just to tell you about one specific one, just today, my partner was meeting with a graphic artist. We're recreating the old covered bridge that used to be over the Susquehanna. And when you go to that site, you hold your phone up, downloading our app, you'll be able to see the bridge as it was over the river, just with the view superimposed over the supports that are there now. And these are just some of the things that you can do with our app, and going to the cemetery and just holding it up. If you see an icon floating over the over someone's grave, you can click on it and get information and video, audio, all sorts of different types of content will pop up. So we're really excited to be working on these history projects.
That's really exciting. Good stuff tonight, as there always is. Got him? Want to make a pitch?
Guy Dunham. I'm affiliated with First Presbyterian Church across the street. Some of you may be aware of the fact that we merged with Faith Presbyterian, a Black congregation, in 1965, right in the middle of the Civil Rights Movement. We've been doing a lot at our church in recognizing the legacy and history of Faith Presbyterian Church. Most recently, within the last year, two things was we commissioned a painting, Ophelia, cannot wait for it to go up, of Faith Presbyterian Church that will hang in the newly named room at First Presbyterian, the faith gathering place. We are in the midst of now getting the floor done. It's been painted. When the floor is done, we're hoping on the first Sunday in October, we will be dedicating both the painting and the room. Those of us who went on the Building Bridge Civil Rights Tour this summer with Todd Allen from Messiah College. One thing that we realized is that there's always opportunities to teach people about the civil rights movement, and particularly here in York. And we realized that we have an opportunity that room, we hope, will not just be a place for the picture to be, but also an opportunity to educate people in our congregation and beyond about some of the icons, particularly who came from Faith Presbyterian Church, who were very much involved in civil rights movement from its inception in 1895 until its merger of 1965. So we're going to turn it into more than just simply a gathering place, but actually a type of teaching location at the church. So we're excited about that project.
Great. Great, thanks, Guy. Any other?
You want me to mention things that the Friends are doing?
Yeah, yes, come on up. Yeah.
Do that. The Friends of the History Center, which basically, does fundraising for, a lot of projects to raise funds for the group. And there is a bus trip coming up, September 28th, I believe it is, to the B&O Railroad Museum down in Maryland. And there's also a presentation at the Cook's House in York City with Mayor Halford is going to be doing a presentation on that, and there'll be some lunch. So I think that's just about sold out. I believe if you go on the History Center website, there's information to sign up for those things. So
Thank you so much. I was on a Witness in York Post. It's a site that Jamie and I operate. I'm doing a post right now. We're doing a post about there must be, I'm counting about 40 projects that started before 2024 or are going to happen yet this decade. There's about 15 of them that already started. 11 cemeteries, one. Hard to believe 5 years. It hasn't even been 5 years yet, I don't think. But I mean, there's also camp security started in earnest in the last 5 years, and now they found the post hole. So that's going to go on, just like limited cemeteries are going to go on after 2024. I mean, there's a new museum down in Hanover. The Strickler House has been saved, and there's work to be done. That's the house out near the prison. And then things that are coming up. It's the Steam Plant Museum that's going to come up next year. The history centers, the Christmas Eggs is having a cultural history center that could be breaking ground this fall yet. There's the Horn Farm is going to rebuild the farmhouse. There's about, I counted 25, and then here tonight I just hear about a bunch of other ones. So that list might be a long one it might be up to 50 before we're done. But the reason for doing this is because we have some major league anniversaries coming up. The 275th of the county, 250th of declaration, 250th of articles, 250th of treaties with France, 250th of the camp security, all coming up in the next 8 years, and most of them right in the middle of the decade. So we have this amazing confluence of brick and mortar and other types of projects that are coming up at the same time we have these anniversaries. This really is a golden time for York County history and history writing and just history exploration, isn't it? I can't find another time in our past that we've had those types of things coming together. For example, 1999, which is a major celebration of the 250th of York County. I mean, it was a great celebration, but there wasn't all this other stuff going on around it. Now we have these celebrations coming up, and we have all this stuff surrounding it. So should be a great 2020s here, rest of the decade. So thank you, Jamie. Introduce Sam.
And my own quick update before I introduce Sam, Project Penny Heaven, it's an initiative we were working on for a city cemetery that's in York. It was Potter's Field. It's located in North York. There are over 800 people buried there with no gravestone. And so the Friends of City Cemetery, which includes myself, but then also Tina and Sam are here, they're on the committee. We finally reached our $20,000 goal. So I am beyond ecstatic. Inflation means things cost more money, so we've had to adjust the exact statue or the monument that we're gonna put in, but it is a go and we're ordering it. So keep a lookout for that. I'm very, very excited. So next we have up Samantha Dorm. She is the queen of multitasking because this entire time she's been sharing on social media all the various things that is happening. She's going to talk tonight about historically significant locations of Black history in York County and ones that frankly have been lost because there haven't been dedicated people to work towards their preservation. And like Jim pointed out, the people who are working today to save a lot of different sites. So without further ado, Sam, thank you. Did you have a clicker? I do. Okay.
Yes, I come equipped with notes. Just give me one moment. So as we see here, the program is listed as the Paved over Prominence. Actually going to go back and tell a little bit more about myself. I am born and raised here in the city of York. I have a significant amount of family here in York, but I also have a significant amount of family here that I did not know. And so I started volunteering at Lebanon Cemetery in 2019. And through that, with some friends and many of the folks that are in the room, community members, we have been going about the business of talking about our people. By our people, I'm talking about York's Black community. And so when putting this information together, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, I'm a numbers person. And so I started noticing a lot of addresses and things that were the same or in the same area. And I learned from people like Jim McClure through his previous presentations, when they talk about redlining, when we talk about, of course, segregation and people not being allowed to live wherever they wanted to live, or even wherever they could afford to live, that through segregation, there were restrictions. And so started putting together this information, did not know why at the time, but here we are today. I coined this program, Paved over Prominence. And when I did that, I thought it was a no-brainer for me because I was thinking in context to prominent people in the Black community or prominent people that I knew of. It could be my church family, people that I knew from school. But because this is a roundtable, I don't want this to just be me standing up here speaking. I'm going to throw this back to you, please. So when you think of prominence, and I want you to think in context to York's Black community, what names do we generally think of or hear about? Just say it out loud, please. Goodrich, absolutely. Anyone else?
Bonnie
Grimes.
Loretta Claiborne.
Excellent. Loretta Claiborne. Any others?
Maddie Chapman.
Maddie Chapman that worked with the schools. I've seen the schools with the court systems. Anyone?
Julia Harris.
Dr. Julia Hines Harris. Absolutely.
George Bowles. Tom Montu.
I think we're at 7. In the room that we are in right now, here at the York County History Center, all on the walls of this particular room is a timeline of York's Black history. For those of you who are not here and able to witness this, it's on the York County History Center website. So you can go to York County History Center's website and view the digital timeline that was created by Miss Ophelia about 2-3 years, I believe, now to learn a little bit more about York's Black history. A lot of this information, again, is kind of what brought us here. So not all of the sites that I'm going to talk about are parking lots. Many of them are. And also because we're limited on time, I only have a few sites. This is not all of them. So we're just going to go through some of the key information here. About Lebanon Cemetery. We have over 3,000, I believe we're probably about 3,700 plus individuals that we know are at Lebanon Cemetery. Vaughn, when you mentioned working on something related to the military, we have over 300 for the military. So we're in the process right now of getting Reeves sponsored so that we can do Reeves across America in December and make sure that all of our veterans are covered during that time. So Lebanon Cemetery in North York was established in 1872. Why? Because people like me wanted an opportunity to bury their loved ones with dignity and respect. Someone that looked like me could not be buried, not just in York County cemeteries, but through segregation all across the country, largely were not permitted in public cemeteries. So our folks were able to pull their resources together and purchase initially 2 acres of land. We today in 2023, we have just under 5 acres and kind of landlocked, but that is where we're located. It is 1412 North George Street in North York. So again, coming to these subjects, I just need to move this for a moment. As I mentioned, I'm a numbers person. I'm a math science person. I generally don't remember names. And when it came to history, I couldn't tell you what year the War of 1812 started. True story. History was never my thing. But as I said, numbers are what appeal to me. And so I went ahead and our volunteers didn't know why I was doing it. Like I said, I didn't know why I was doing it, but I was driving them crazy putting together these Excel spreadsheets. So as I was either on newspapers.com, or if I was looking at an obituary, if I was looking at or reading someone's wedding announcement, I was laying out the addresses and putting notes. Who was there? When were they there? When did this take place? And when you're talking about addresses, again, for the writers that are here, you have to definitely include in there the years, because the addresses changed. So around, I think around 1903, 1904, there would have been more dwellings. So you may see something on here where it says like 139 North Duke Street, and it'll have a member of the Gray family, but then you also see 141 North Duke Street. That doesn't mean they moved next door. It could possibly have been the address change. So we have to go back and look and see, okay, when exactly was this? So always include in there your date. Okay, that is key. And then just with some of the notes, I put up some of the names. This is only a snapshot. This particular block, this street has several more entries, but this is what would fit on the screen and you would be able to still see it. So we get to folks like Hamilton Gray. We get to individuals like Mary A.C. Smallwood Gray. She married into the Gray family. Mary A.C. Smallwood Gray was the sister of James Smallwood. James Smallwood being one of our first educators. I believe he's like our third that we have on record that we know of, our third Black educator for that York City area. First one being Glenn Alvin Goodrich, second one being Francis Ellen Watkins Harper, and then you had James Smallwood. When they first started teaching, they were teaching at the church, the AME church. The AME church was also on the 100 block of North Duke Street, and I'll show you that in just a moment. So again, the timelines are really important. The very last entry here, it says Victor Carey, and that he was being released from the hospital. And I put that one there to show how then we get people connected to others in other parts of town. So Victor Carey, I knew by this point, married one of the sisters of Helen Reeves Thaxton. But he started out in York and the records on North Duke Street. So was he a family member of the Grays, the Smallwoods, the Goodriches? Was he just a boarder? Why was he there? I have not pursued that story. We have plenty of writers in the room. So I'm giving you some leads. Why was Victor Carey at this location at that time? Hang on to that name. So in the Duke Street area, this is North Duke Street. This would be the 100 block of North Duke Street. And the AME Church was located in this block. Now it is the small Memorial AME Zion Church, which is in the 400 block of South Queen Street. It started in 1818 on North Duke. Okay, that same block is where we had Hamilton and Jane Gray, who we have documented as also being active with the Underground Railroad. Their daughter, Rhoda, married Glenn Alvin Goodrich. So you have the Grays marrying into the Goodrich family. When you see here where it says Goodrich family, it says Glenn Alvin Jr., because when he came back to York, Pennsylvania, and established his business and went about working to establish then Faith Presbyterian Church, his property was also then on North Duke Street. We see, of course, then James Smallwood, as well as other key members. So these were our leaders. So the early to mid 1800s, like that North Duke Street and East Philadelphia Street area was really the hub of where we were seeing our prominent Black citizens moving and shaking. Okay, questions? Why and how is that relevant to today? Over here on the map, right under, we'll see if this will do it. Here under W, this is telling us that this is where the AME Church was located. I found here, Tina and I were having a late night work session, going through lots of articles, and came across this one where it's talking about an estate of someone not related to the church, but their property bordered the church property. So now we know where the church property was located on Duke Street. But here, when you come down, it says it includes burial grounds. So there was a church and a cemetery in the 100 block of North Duke Street. The 100 block of North Duke Street today. It is very likely that William C. Goodrich, I use that name because so many of you know it, that his wife and at least 2 of his children are under this parking lot. We cannot find any records showing that the bodies at this location were ever disinterred. If anyone has those records, we would love to see them, but we have no indication. So what you're seeing here, the clipping that you showed, that was shown where the cemetery was to have been located. John Findance with C.S. Davidson, I sent that over to him, and he ran it down in the rain because his office is a block away. He went in the rain, he was so excited, and he was down doing the measurements to confirm exactly where the church and the cemetery would have been. At a minimum, I feel we should maybe have a historical marker there. At a minimum, you're never going to hear me say, hey, we need to go over here and do GPS and disinter the bodies. That's not what I am saying. There are some places where things like that have happened. But at this point, this many years, I don't know that anything would be found. But I do believe that this block is significant to York's Black history. Remember, it's a discussion. It's a discussion, so jump in at any time.
All right,
Sam.
Sam, since you opened that up, at the very minimum, yes, you can have a historical marker because you have enough information to apply for that. You could also do a footprint marked in, stamped in footprint of where the church and the cemetery was.
Hmm.
And let that be part of that historical marker.
Mhm.
You can also, since the State Museum is now archiving all of its data, go back and double check those records to see about whether or not they were disinterred or whether or not there's additional information, because they just scanned and recorded, because they're moving the entire archive system, millions of new files. So it might be something worth checking.
I'm just thinking, oh boy, you just gave me a project because I could be in those files for weeks.
Yeah.
The geek in me just said,
Online
"What?"
accessible. Yes.
So if, for those of you, if you didn't hear, we were talking then about, first of all, would be placement of historical markers, which goes through PHMC at the state. We do have this site now in PA Share. This is one of the sites that I was able to include as a part of that Chesapeake Mapping project. But yes, you know, we're all volunteers, so looking for folks that could help with something like that. And then that footprint that you're representing, Mike, the digital footprint, that augmented reality, how do we bring this block to life?
Yeah, we get brass stamps that indicate, and then do the AR attached to it as well.
Scribe, sorry. There's some folks in the room that I'm like, can we write that down? But we will have the recording because that's wonderful. And I'm glad that this is exactly why we're here, to be able to bounce those ideas off of how do we get this story out there. Another area, 500 block of Cleveland Avenue. So just on the other side of Penn Park. Cleveland Avenue runs parallel to, what would that be, Pershing and George Street. So some of the address that you're going to see here, 523, 525, 529, also Boundary Avenue. There were at least 5, maybe 6 properties that were owned by John C. Reeves, the father of Helen Reeves Thaxton. So as his children married, he made sure everybody had a house. They just all had to live in the same neighborhood. But he did make sure that his family was taken care of. And so as you're looking down through here, I have to come over this side, 1903, we have Mrs. John Reeves, which is Sarah Ellen Reeves, Gertrude Reeves, her daughter, and it says Ethel. We know now that it should say Etha. Coles traveled to the Gettysburg home of Mrs. William Bell, mother of Mrs. Reeves. So many storylines that can come out of that. In regards to now with Gettysburg, I do know that Lincoln Cemetery over in Gettysburg is in the process of tracking down descendants of those who are interred there, which includes many individuals from York. So now I've got to look and see, did the Reeves family also have connections to Lincoln Cemetery? Because we know that Mrs. Bell was the mother of Mrs. Reeves. Okay, so we're seeing them there, and we're seeing Ethel Coles with the Reeves family. When Ethel Coles' father, the gentleman who had adopted her and her sister Clara, when he passed away around 1897, they went to live with the Reeves family. So that's why we're then seeing them over in this area. Cleveland Avenue, we also then have names like St. Clair Dixon, who was marrying Sarah. We have the birthday of John C. Reeves. And if you read that article, it's very detailed about the prizes that he received and who was there. And now that we know these names, it's like the who's who, truly like royalty for York. It's just amazing. Inez Mortimer is one of our first Black teachers, but she's living with the Reeves family when she first came here. Also living with the Reeves family when they first came here, last century, Ray Crenshaw, who was one of our city councilmen and was very active with the charrette during the civil rights movement.
Did
Yes.
you ever run across Helen Pico or Picho? I thought she lived on Cleveland Avenue. Is that maybe it wasn't this block?
It is, I think it's the other side of the street.
Okay.
So same thing, my little tab down there has a lot more entries, like I was like condensing. So that would be the Pico family, and her maiden name is Williams. So the Williams brother, there were 6 Williams brothers that served during World War II, that were part of then that Gold Star family, the Gold Star mothers, and they lost their brother Charles E. Williams during that time. So that was their sister was Helen Pico.
Yeah, Bonnie Grimes would say that that's where. She would take in folks staying overnight and so on, that wouldn't be able to stay at the Yorktown and elsewhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we get to some of those entries. So where did people stay when they came to York if they couldn't stay into our establishments? And so there were a number of families who are not listed in the Green Book. We're going to see some Green Book entries. They're not listed in the Green Book, but based on the names of the people that were staying there at any given time, could very easily have been listed. It was more of a local, go over here, she'll take care of it. Any other question? Okay, so we see the name Victor Carey now here because he married, as I said, one of the sisters of Helen Reeve Saxton. Underneath it says Jean Carey. Jean Carey is the first Black salutatorian for York Catholic. She graduated in 1936. She was raised by Helen Saxton. She was raised by her aunt. This is the 500 block of Cleveland Avenue today. So over here, actually off to this end would be George Street. We've got Cleveland coming here. This is Boundary. Over here is part of the WellSpan facilities that you have, and of course, a parking lot. So as I mentioned, you had 5 or 6 properties here and here owned by John C. Reeves, who happened to be involved with oysters. He sold oyster sandwiches and things to be able to take care of his family. So that's one of the stories that we include when we talk about, the role of oysters in enabling families to prosper in this area. Again, another potential place for markers. I personally do not have any pictures of the structures that sat here, but many of the family members for the Reeves family are still in this area, and we may be able to secure some of that information. I believe they were very active as well with Faith Presbyterian Church.
Ivan Reeves.
Yes.
Who just passed this year.
So if his daughter has his picture albums or anything like that, to be able to scour, because that's the kind of information that we could utilize to bring this block back to life. Okay, we're gonna go through these a little bit quicker just so that we have time for some discussion here. This is going to be then William Penn Senior High School is here. This entire block is now William Penn Senior High School. Okay, all 4 sides, significant Black history. All 4 sides. We're going to start up here where I have in red. This would be the location of the Howard Hotel. The Howard Hotel listed on the Green Book entry. And this is just an ad when they were selling the property later, so that you had, again, confirmation of where it was located with the Howard Hotel. So along West Princess Street, when I speak to the elders in the community, when I talk to folks, certainly like someone like Jeff Kirkland, they refer to this area as being York's Black Wall Street. This is where we had our businesses. We had many of our families. The first 2 Black police officers lived on these 2 blocks. That would be Mr. Diggs as well as Samuel Green. And we're talking in the late 1800s, early 1900s, that we had Black police officers in the city of York. Also along this side, you'll see, it says here, I'm always going to say this wrong. If it's yeah man or ye man. So, but this was a cafe that was owned by our Olympian, Mr. John Terry. John Terry competed in the 1936 Olympics. He moved to York for York Barbell. He was a weightlifter, and we have that information on our website. And then the Smallwood Restaurant, which was my great grandmother's restaurant, also was on this block. So where I'm kind of doing this here along this side, that's what this picture is here. So this would be the corner of Pershing and Princess Street today. So you had a church, you can see what some of the properties look like along this side. That is now the high school. Where the high school cafeteria is located, that is the original footprint of the Smallwood School, the school for colored children. So that foundation that everyone walks into each day to eat lunch, that is the original foundation of the Smallwood School. There is a historical marker right outside of the door there on Pershing. So, you know, when you see that marker, take a selfie and post that so that we can acknowledge that on this side here is where the Smallwood School would have been. And then I'm gonna come over here, across the street. So I believe this is St. Patrick's Church, and you see the parking lot that's here. The map that I have over here is from 1850. So this would be Penn Park. And then this is over where St. Pat's is currently located. And you'll see that the cemetery is literally cut in half. Probably a fence or something that's there. The front half says colored cemetery. And then this was for the Catholic Church. So around 1850, this was listed as the colored cemetery. And then things like smallpox happened, as well as other contagious diseases. And the city made a decision to utilize that land as the Potter's Field. So when you start reading about it later in the 1870s and so, they refer to the Potter's Field as being the place for the disease, the indigent, and the Negro. That's it. The disease, the indigent, and the Negro. So when we started today, Jamie was talking about this initiative that we have where we've raised money to get signage at the Potter's Field. The bodies were disinterred from this site and taken to a location also in North York, but it's just an open field. And through Jamie's leadership, we'll be able to have that signage, but there are no names. I think there might be one or two names around 1872. And then there are a few here and there, but we should really start seeing names after 1900. But we know that this started out as a colored cemetery. So looking at the known information, the race of those individuals, which probably is going to be a little over 40% Black. If you take the years when it was only a colored cemetery, that number goes a lot higher. And so we, the Black community, have a vested interest in making sure that the Potter's Field is taken care of. Those are our families. Moravian Playground. So now we're going to West Princess and Pershing. At one time, if you didn't know, Pershing was known as Water Street. So this area here is the parking lot. It is now newly paved, so it's not this color. But this is the parking lot that is across from the Agricultural Museum is here, and then the high school gymnasium would be here. So this is at the Cador's Creek. The bike trail is going to be down along this way. This parking lot was once where Moravian Church and Moravian Cemetery were located in the 1800s. The last burial took place in 1901, and it was one and only Black individual that was to be buried there. And from 1901 to 1905, there were no more burials, but the church had moved. And so they were looking to sell the land. They disinterred the bodies. They were taken to other locations. And their one and only congregant who was Black came to Lebanon Cemetery. So for 4 years, she was buried with the folks from church, even though she was Black. And then when they moved, she came to Lebanon. I don't know the background of that as to why that took place, but we know it took place. And so as of 1905, this land, they're trying to sell the land, weren't really getting any takers. They make a deal with the city of York to turn this into a playground. So in the late 20s until around 1939, this became Moravian Playground, the only playground in the city for colored children. How close is Penn Park? But we had Moravian Playground. When you read the articles about all the activities that they did there, or better yet, if you read the articles about who the playground directors were, and it was folks like Ivan Reeves and Helen Thaxton and these pioneers, you know, when they were teenagers or they were early in their career, they were all the playground directors during the summertime. But playground was not a place where you just play. When they came, they had a lesson and then they had activity. They had life skills. We were reading through some of the articles and I said, oh, I failed. Sir, you would not be proud of me. We have over here with Lieutenant Colonel John Howard. He does the JROTC with York High, and those kids would be light years ahead of me because I'm looking at some of the things that they had to learn, like how to treat a snake bite. I'm done. But they had to be self-reliant and self-resilient because we didn't have doctors and physicians readily available to treat people that look like me. So you had to be able to take care of your family. So there were lessons on the playground, not just play. So with Moravian Playground, we have a number of different names that come up. We have articles where they held boxing matches and they tell you, who was going to be in those. And those are our fathers and grandfathers, and including my own grandfather, to see his name in the 1930s boxing at Moravian Playground. There's a little clip in here that it does tell you that it is a playground for Negro children. And then I wanted to talk about, how this also then relates to Newberry Street, because we've had so many changes in that Newberry Street corridor. The picture here is Joanna Harris, Aunt Joe Lane. So when you're going down West Princess Street, you cross over Newberry, the very first cutout going back into, that would be Newton Square, excuse me, is named for Joanna Harris. So Aunt Joe Lane. She was the lead playground director. She also was the head of Girl Scouts over at Crispus Attucks. The other gentleman that you see here, he was the owner of that cafe 1 block away. Went through some tough times. As I mentioned, the information is on our website, but he purchased 139, what is that, South Newberry Street, and opened that as a youth center for young boys and girls in 1954 to keep them off of the streets. Faith Presbyterian Church. Faith Presbyterian Church, as well as the community house located at 50 and 52 North Duke Street. These are some members of the congregation here in this photo from 1944. And this is the area now, which I believe we now have some luxury apartments that are back in this area. C.S. Davidson was down around this area. And we have some of the names associated then with Faith Presbyterian. I know that there are a number of videos available on YouTube through First Presbyterian's website where you can learn about Faith Presbyterian. How many in the series? About 5 or 6 videos, sir?
Now have a.
You now have 8. So go to the First Presbyterian Church of York and their YouTube page, and you can learn all about here with Faith Presbyterian. And as I said, parking lot. Before I go any further, questions, suggestions, comments? Quiet.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
In regards to the markers that you were talking about earlier, are there like GPS coordinates on those markers that link to, say, Google Earth or anything of that nature?
So for the existing historical markers that we have, I don't know the answer to that. I don't believe they're GPS recognized. I believe on the state website, they'll tell you they're in York and they may give you the location, or it might say the block where it's at, but not GPS. But boy, would that be a wonderful project for your students.
I don't know.
Happy to work with you.
I'll get you the list.
Like that, how would we get them associated or assigned specifically to Google Earth? I'm sure we would have to probably write the directors or something.
We have some wonderful tech folks in the room, as well as some wonderful tech folks who are watching tonight. So if this is something that we can talk as a follow-up for here, would love to do that. So the question was whether or not the historical markers, the existing historical markers, are on like Google Earth or Google Maps, or have that GPS coordinate to make it easy to get to. So if we can spearhead something like that here for York, I would love to be a part of that, sir.
And one thing I'm thinking is, John, is to where if we could hit that marker, then it could also give a maybe a 3D image of what we used to Black Wall Street here, by everyone black or something, this in the story.
Absolutely. And so the gentleman here in the blue shirt in the back, that is something that he's working with us on for those 3D models. So I'll definitely make sure we get you connected. So thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Just to go back to Paved, I think that one of the things that's important for people to understand, it was just not the location of a church, but right next to it was Community House, which was formed at the initiation of William E. Williams, a pastor who came from Baltimore. When he arrived there, they had bought the house for a manse, but he was associated with the Black YMCA. And he came and found that there was none in York and asked them if they would make the first floor basically a community center for the Black youth in the community. And Dr. George Bowles became the president of the trustees. Glenn Alvin Goodrich was also on that, a number of other people as well. But it's a forerunner of Crispus Attucks,
Yes.
because out of that then came the concept that George Bowles then went on, and with Thomas Monteith, pastor of Faith, and a few other men, started Crispus Attucks.
So significant
Yeah.
amount of history associated with this site.
Yeah.
And again, wanting to bring those stories together and get this content available for people to be able to share. And also because we still have so many of the families are here
Yes.
and they don't know what their grandparents and great grandparents did. I think when we did the program there at Faith about a year ago on Juneteenth, which was the anniversary of the burning of the mortgage. And some of the existing members just kind of said, we didn't know our church was anything special. We were just going to church, you know? And so to hear those stories now and being able to capture that while we still have people living that can tell the stories is so important.
Brenda Elby, who's a member of that, Dan Elby's wife, grew up at Faith Presbyterian, and she did not know that Community House was basically started for the reason. She said, that's where Sunday school and youth group was. Are you? And she asked me the first time, she said, are you sure you're right, Guy? And I said, Brenda, I have information about it. And she had not even known the
Well, the other
significance
thing-
of
The
community.
other thing about the community house was everything that we're reading, they made sure they served members of the white and Black community.
Yes,
They did not turn anyone away. It
No.
truly was a community-based center.
yes.
But you hit on something that many people don't know when you said about there was a Black YMCA, there's a Black YWCA, and that was all across the country, including at Tuskegee, where Lois Lambert Reeves of York, Pennsylvania, was leading the colored YMCA, YWCA at Tuskegee. And she was from York. I think the wording that we've seen from one of the YWCA's in Philadelphia, it just said basically separate but equal. So as long as they could have the same programs, just be in another building.
It was also a cultural center. They had their own
for the
symphony,
community.
they would bring speakers in, they also had a medical center. Because a lot of people could not access medical care, so they
And
had.
so the information for the community house, we do have some on our website, but I know you have certainly much more for anybody that's looking for that, to be able to go to First Presbyterian's YouTube page and your website, and we can get that information to them. After this, also, if you get a chance, you're welcome to put the links in on the Facebook Live post so that people will be able to find that information if they come back. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, we would really appreciate it to add those links as well. So the base of the suffrage movement, the Negro subcommittee of the women's suffrage movement was primarily in the 200 block of East King Street. There were several properties there. This area is one of the few where several of the properties are still standing. But we don't have anything to recognize what was taking place in these neighborhoods. So when you have names like Ethel Coles Armstrong, Clara Coles, Virginia Hart, who was an artist, her paintings were shown at, I believe, the 50th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. We have Elder Mary J. Small. So looking up here, this is a picture from the Smithsonian's African American History Museum in Washington, D.C. And you'll notice that this picture is the same because there is an exhibit in D.C. about Mary J. Small. She's the first female elder in the AME Church. She's buried in Lebanon Cemetery. She and her husband, Bishop Small, are the reason that we have the name Small Memorial AME Zion Church. We don't celebrate her here. And yet here she is in Washington, D.C. Bishop Small and Mary J. Small lived at 307, 309 East King Street. I believe years later, those properties were the Atkins House for female offenders. Or at that particular location. And then the family of Ethel Coles Armstrong, they still own and live in their property. But there was another property on the block when Reverend Coles was alive that was here. So that's part of it is now a parking lot, and then the house up here is that where the family still has. So Reverend Coles passed in 1897. He's one of our USCTs that we have at Lebanon Cemetery, and he's also been spotlighted with the University of Virginia pretty extensively, that you can go on their website and learn about Reverend Jesse S. Coles. So then we get into King Street. This is now the 100 block of East King Street, the 100 block of South Duke, as well as the 100 block of South Queen. We see names like Reverend John Hector, who is one of our USCT, also big with the temperance movement. He lived at 116 East King Street, which after his death later then became one of our Green Book locations. It is today the home of Parliament Arts. That is where Reverend Hector lived. Dr. George Bowles was in the 100 block of South Duke Street, and his home is still standing. I believe in the 90s, it was used as a hospice for AIDS patients. Okay, we have members of the Joyce family, owned several businesses, owned several homes on King Street, Duke Street, as well as on South Queen. One of those properties would be where the cantina is currently located. And then the second home of the AME Church, you'll see a larger picture soon. This is here. This set where the Bond building is located at King and Queen Street. So that parking lot is where the second location of the AME Church was. So they started on North Duke Street, then they moved to this location. That is a parking lot. But if we're able to superimpose those 3D models of the church at that site, that when people are looking at their mobile devices and being able to then see the history, then that's part of what we're working towards. So I wanted to put this in here real quick because this part of it is really important to me. We know that that Royal Square area now, we just had arts festival where you have 20+ structures, probably that have murals. And so the Royal Square area, which is King, Queen, Duke, and Princess, so that area, King, Queen, Duke, and Princess in York City. In the, I want to say alley, but we now call them avenues, but alley would have been East Newton. Back on August 9th, I was able to tour this structure, which is 119 East Newton. I know this says Newgate, it's Newton. So just ignore that. And this is where my grandfather lived. Him and his brothers, back in the 1930s, early 40s. And then a few weeks later, I drive through and it's now been a canvas. And it was jarring. Not because it was a bad painting, but because I wondered, would the vision of the artist have been different had they known the stories of what this neighborhood represented? Would the vision of the artist have been different if they knew that this woman raised 5 children by herself after her husband, her mother, and her 2-year-old daughter all died in the same year in 1921, and she was left to raise 5 kids? Would it have been a different story if they had known that those children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-greats are business owners, medical professionals, military leaders, a brigadier general? Would the vision have been different? So when we come to the Writers' Roundtable, part of the challenge here now is, how do we get these stories out there so that the interpretation can be viewed by all? Again, it's not that it's a bad mural. For me, it didn't represent the greatness of the family that was raised in what was an alley. My uncles were telling a story, I believe, Jim, were about 2 years ago, where they were saying, you know, when they first moved on Patterson Street, out on the east end of town, their home is now a vacant lot, where they lived on Patterson Street. But they said that there was a lot of anger because they were the first Black family out there to live on a street. Now, if you know anything about Patterson Street today, it's really not that much to look at, but it was a street. They weren't back in the alley. And so they were telling that, you know, their grandfather used to have to come with his shotgun and stand guard while their father was at work, because people didn't want them living on the street. When we started this, we had this thing about prominence. And I said, you know, for me, it's about the leaders of the Black community here in York. And also because of situations where through redlining, we weren't allowed to live in other places. You had doctors, you had lawyers, you had people who had the means to live elsewhere, but couldn't because of the color of their skin. So where are we going with this? Part of this vision, I had mentioned about, you know, how do we go about getting those permanent markers? Is that something that we would want to do or could do? There's a lot of things that come into play with that, including raising money to do so. But also then you have to be able to maintain these things. So there needs almost like that perpetual care. But then also we have things like these augmented reality or being able to do these virtual tours. Is there a way to take something like this where we're looking at the AME church? This particular building is when it sat at on South Pershing, which would have been the 3rd location. This here would be at the Queen and King Street location, which was their 2nd location. And this is a picture of where they are today. I believe it's 401 South Queen Street. So can we take this information? But more importantly, even if we can do that, we need the content. So we've done this research. I have these spreadsheets. They have lots of links. What do I do with it? So with that, I want to thank all of our volunteers with the Friends of Lebanon Cemetery who contributed research to help pull this information together. Certainly thank the York County History Center for being a tremendous resource for us. On Facebook to pull some of this information, I generally use the hashtag York Black History, and our website is also here, www.friendsoflebanoncemetery.com. So at that, I'll go ahead and open for any questions.
Sam, just, it's interesting that Jamie and I have come up with a list on Witness New York of about 20 prominent buildings and or sites that have been paved over, mostly paved over, and including most on your list
Yes.
here tonight. I think it has to be pointed out that it was the whole paving over process was a epidemic in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And if we could have had some of those buildings back, if we could have the city market back, we had, the Children's Home of York back, if we could have many of those, we'd be a different city. It's not, all that just brings tears to your eyes almost, and including those that you mentioned here tonight, certainly. But the big picture was there's a panic about the suburban growth, York County Shopping Center and York Mall and so on. And so the city fathers panicked and they tore down all these precious buildings to make parking lots.
I remember when I worked for the city of Lancaster, I was like, wow, they have a lot of parking lots. But we do too. It's just they built theirs in levels and we took up more land just on a single level. But we do have many parking lots and we have many of them that are vacant. To be able to do something there at these sites would be very beneficial. I just want to say, I know we're reading in the news right now, there's so much going on in regards to the Hope House and saving of the Hope House. Well, part of the reason that you have people wanting to join that initiative is because the stories have been told. These stories have not. Dr. George Bowles, for many of us here in York County, year over year, we always say he's the first Black student to graduate from York High. Well, that's not true. He's the first Black male. So we got to that. So the first Black student would have been Ella Robinson, probably at least 15 years before Dr. Bowles. And earlier this year, for some reason, I went back and I was looking at articles and I noticed 2 more names after Dr. Bowles. So it turns out there were actually 3 young Black men that graduated in that class of 1898. But we don't talk about their stories. One was Reverend George Samuel Burton. I believe I have that right. I know it's Reverend Burton. He's buried at a church over in Marietta. And he was with Faith Presbyterian Church. He graduated from Lincoln University. The other gentleman, I believe his name was William Collins. It's either, I have that information on there. I know it's a C and it's either William Collins or William Chambers. So I will put the information on the link. But there were 3 Black students, young Black men that graduated in 1898, but we only talk about 1. So how do we collectively go about fixing history so that those coming behind us are not still going with this dialogue that only Dr. Bowles graduated that year from York High? So I'm hoping, again, as a community, that we can continue to collaborate on resources and efforts and getting these stories out there. So thank you so much for coming this evening, giving me your time. I do appreciate it.
Are there any other questions for Sam at all? Oh, here's one. Blake.
Actually would like to have a conversation with you once you have some time post questionnaires.
Not a problem. Thank you very much.
Sam, before you
you leave, thank you so much for this book. How can a member of the public buy this?
Sure. So this is the Lebanon Cemetery 150th anniversary edition. So our 150th anniversary was last year in August. And so we do a walking tour. If you're interested in a walking tour, you can go onto our website. But we also wanted to make sure that we had some information for people to take back with them. This is only about 10 names out of over 3,000 people. So we're continuing to put these out. You can get this on Amazon presently. So just look for the Friends of Lebanon Cemetery, and the other books will also be there as well.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you. This was Writers Roundtable at its best, where the speaker challenges us to do more and do better, be smarter about what we do, and more smarter about the topics that we research. So this is just great, Sam. Thank you so much. In December, our program will be John Linebaugh, who's a professor in the University of Maryland, does local history work. Down in the south eastern part of the county, will be speaking about the Ramsey Theater and the demolition of that theater in Stewartstown, but he also will talk about other theaters and the importance of theaters in York County in the 20th century. So stay tuned for that. Wanted to close tonight by, I was just looking today at, we've heard the name Smallwood here tonight several times, and this is a kinsman, William Lee Smallwood, and many of us knew, a kinsman of Sam's, maybe others in the room here. And he wrote a booklet in 1991, which was an early, if not the first. It was a booklet. It was a compilation, had a lot of good information in it. Has a lot of good information in it. It's available back. And in fact, that's one of the early, if not the first, Black history books that we have in York County. And what was interesting was that was done as part of the 250th of York. So it goes to show how these anniversaries can bring together new things. And per my comments a little bit earlier tonight, but that brought, there was also a calendar as part of that celebration. I'm not aware of the other celebrations we've had in 1976 and in 1927, that there was an intentionality to include Black history as part of those celebrations. But in 1991, there was, and there's a calendar that was put out that showed sites in York County that were precious to the Black community. So it's very interesting to see those. I think I put some of those, if not all those, in Almost Forgotten, a book I did about 20 years ago. So these celebrations are important. I mentioned William Smallwood, and he wrote in his booklet from 1991 a place to kind of end the evening, and I think God would probably call this a benediction. I don't know, but he wrote in his booklet, "A great history reflects the greatness of a people. It is a reputation chiseled in time to speak of why they are and what they are capable of. There is no future for a people who deny their past. If you don't know who you are as a people, you don't know who you are as a person." So that was words of wisdom from the late William Lee Smallwood, a great friend of mine, and we all miss him. If you don't know who you are as a people, you don't know who you are as a person. Very interesting. Thank you all very much tonight.